Elise Pickett here with the Urban Harvest, and today we are going to be talking soil biology with Paul Krall. He does Paul Krall biochar, but he is also one of my buddies as far as the importance of soil health, and we both see incredible value there. And so today we wanted to share what that even means and how you can support it in your garden to really amplify all of the efforts that you put into your garden. So as far as soil biology, what is soil biology? What is soil life?
Soil biology is the natural ecosystem in our soil. So what we're trying to do is use that to help the plants. You look at a natural forest, right? No one's out there fertilizing, and yet it's one of the most amazing sustainable ecosystems naturally by itself. Well, how do trees get the nutrition and the minerals to grow that large? Well, no one has disturbed the soil ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. I was reading a statistic the other day, and it was like 75% of the nitrogen available to plants to uptake is available to those plants because of the soil ecosystem. And so that just to me was kind of like an eye-opener as far as you could go put the recommended amount of fertilizer, whether it be organic or chemical, but the plants can't access what you're putting in there without an intact and functional soil ecosystem.
Well, what's amazing is that there's a symbiosis between the plants and the microorganisms that live next to it. So the plants themselves, 30% of what the sugars that a plant produces, they don't use them themselves. They actually exude them as exudates into the soil, right? And that's what's actually feeding that whole process. So it's amazing. It's amazing. The sun, the photons come in, the plant through photosynthesis produces all these sugars, sends 30% of that down into the soil, and the entire soil ecosystem lives off of that 30% that our trees and our plants are putting down underground.
So the soil biology that we keep referencing is a combination of all sorts of different animals. It's bacteria, it's cyanobacteria, it's fungi, it is nematodes, it is
arthropods,
microarthropods. There's an entire city living beneath our feet, and it's so interesting because we can't see it with the naked eye, and so we just completely discount it, but it is there, it is proven, and it's just like mind-boggling. So like I have a friend, and he gave me the analogy. It's like, okay, so do you remember where you were last week? Oh yeah, sure, I was at work or whatever. Okay, so if I were to give you an aerial map of your county, would you be able to kind of point to the map and show me where you were? Yeah, I could do that, no problem. And then you zoom out a little bit and you're like, okay, so now we're showing like all of Florida. Do you know where you were? Oh yeah, I think I was right around in here. And then let's take it from an airplane flying through the sky. Well, that'd be rather difficult. Now let's take it from outer space, right? Can you figure out where you were at that point in time? Probably not. You were there, You're there, but you can't see it. And it's the same exact thing with what's beneath our feet. They're there, we just can't see it with the naked eye. And they're critical components to a functional garden in a healthy ecosystem.
They are. And the big thing is just don't kill them. They're there naturally. If we just stop putting on the pesticides, if we stop spreading the inorganic salt fertilizers, they're there. They're there naturally. I mean, we can do things to support them and boost their numbers and make that system produce much more for our plants, but just stop killing them.
So some of the things that we could potentially consider or look at when we are thinking about how do we support them, like they're there naturally, and so you don't need to do much aside from not kill them.
Yeah.
But there are things that we can do to support their growth and their proliferation within our gardens. So
my top three would be, first of all, homemade compost. Make it. Like, you've got the materials at home anyway. Second, if you can't do that, if it's too much work, if it's too smelly in the backyard, all the excuses we have for not doing compost, get worm castings. That is a great resource.
And that's also one that I have an entire video on that, but that's one you can do on a smaller scale. So if you're working in a smaller urban setting, or if you're concerned, like he was saying, about the smells or the whatever, that is a more easily managed system, and it's still productive as far as creating that soil biology. I love worm castings for that.
And the third one I would say for sure is compost teas. Get a little bubbler. It's a 5-gallon bucket and a little air pump. Go on YouTube.
Yeah, there's lots of those. And I'd like to add to that, those are 3 great. I'd also always encourage roots in the ground.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so Paul was saying earlier about the exudates and the sugars. If we have our soil ecosystem is starting to develop, and let's say we're going on vacation for the summer, or you're from up north and you close down shop here in Florida for a little while, or you're just tired and busy with life, so you're like, I'm just not going to garden this year, I'll come back next year. That drop, when all of the plants disappear from that system, there's nothing feeding them anymore. And so always having roots in the ground is the teas, the compost, the worm castings help you to incorporate those into the system. But even if you're doing that, if you don't have food for them throughout the year,
right.
So you don't have to actively garden necessarily. There's summer cover crops, there's winter cover crops. You can pick productive but low maintenance crops. So like if you are, since we're heading into summer, if you're heading out of town, put some sweet potatoes in the ground, or some cowpeas, something you literally have. You don't have to water it, you don't have to manage it in any way, shape, or form. You just come back to food.
Yeah, my go-to is sun hemp. That's another one. It's going to be fixing nitrogen as well. So
yeah, it's a win-win, because it's also feeding more nutrients into the soil, so that when you do come back, there's nutrients, there's soil life, and it's just a perfect. That's part of. I have a summer cover crop blend that I do, and I do sun hemp, cowpeas, millet, sorghum, and marigolds.
Perfect.
Yep, the marigolds are nice too. Keeps those beneficial insects in there. There's so many different ways, but I think the gist of what we're trying to get across right now is that regardless of whether we see them, we need to acknowledge that they are there and try to support them in any way possible. And that is done by avoiding synthetic, non-organic fertilizers, always keeping something growing in the ground, and trying as best we're able to incorporate large numbers via compost, worm castings, worm compost, or any sort of compost teas into the soil. And I will say, if you are just getting started and you don't have your compost ready yet, or you haven't set up worm bins yet, that's the long end game here, the end goal. But I have found Holganix is kind of a workaround. And so basically all it is, it's all organic. They are just creating in a controlled environment all of the stuff we're talking about. So they have like 100 different microbes, and it's basically just glorified compost tea.
Yeah, I mean, I use SCD probiotics.
Yep.
And that's another good brand.
Yeah, so it's basically flooding the soil, but you can purchase it. So I'm very much in favor of you doing it on your own, but if you're just getting started, or if you are, in the midst of everything, in the beginning, there's nothing wrong with those kinds of inoculants. You you water it into the soil. You can use watering cans, you can use the hose and sprayers, whatever, and you just work that into the soil. And I have done side-by-side testing with that, and I have found tremendous differences. Even with me, having a food forest and doing things with the permaculture mindset, it takes time to build up that soil from devoid nothingness.
Yeah.
And
many of us
those
are
just
starting.
Speeds up the process.
Many of us are starting from that exactly. I mean, you
Exactly.
go out into a lot of these yards and it's just sand.
Yep.
Right? There's no organic matter, nothing in the soil. So
Sun's been
I do
blazing
want to
down.
mention that get some mulch down, and then things like pigeon pea, right? Cover and shade that soil too. Anything you could do to bring that temperature down makes it more hospitable for those microorganisms in the soil.
Most of the microorganisms live in the top 6 to 12 inches of soil, and that also happens to be, especially here in Florida, full sun, that's baking hot in the middle of summer, and that there are microbes that will go through that process, but we're going to be reducing the population significantly.
Oh, many of them will go dormant.
Yeah.
Like it goes outside their, comfort window,
and
they'll
shut
just go
down.
dormant.
So when we do things, it's just like, when we think about going to the beach, right? So like beach, middle of summer, you are running to the water because it's so hot on top of the sand. Dig your feet down 6 inches, wiggle your toes into that sand, and it's nice and cool. So if we can mimic that kind of thought process in our gardens, whether it be through mulch, through cover crops, through some sort of ground cover, through shade trees or bushes, all of these things help to kind of make it a little bit more favorable, not flavorable, and just tip it in their favor. So hopefully this was helpful as far as understanding the basic biology of your garden, and I cannot emphasize enough how critical of a component this is to a successful organic garden. If you guys wanted to reach out to Paul to learn more about his biochar or how he supports the soil ecosystem, I will have links down below so that you can get in touch with him.
And real quick, I just want to say, first Tuesdays, we have Lake Permaculture. So if you're in the Lake County area or one of the neighboring counties, stop on by, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., right in that area.
Yeah,
Always
building
have
community is a good thing.
We always have a new speaker on some permaculture-based topic, so come on out.
Yeah, and if you're not in that area, just permaculture is obviously what we have been referencing here together, but permaculture is everywhere, and I can almost guarantee there's going to be someone in your fairly near vicinity. So searching permaculture farm, permaculture nursery, permaculture grower near me, and you'll probably find someone closer than you might expect. So reach out, build some community in your actual neighborhood community and in the soil.
Ecosystem in the soil.